Hi there, everyone. It's Sam Derrick here, and I'll be your host for today's episode of Dusk Till Dawn, the podcast for Dawn, the Disability and Wellness Network. It's episode 5, and today I'm joined by Michael Needham, who is also a member of the Dawn Committee, and he's coming today to talk to us about his experiences with dyspraxia and dyslexia. Hi, Michael. Welcome to the podcast. How are you doing today?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks. How about yourself?
Yeah, very well, thank you. So I thought to start, maybe if you just want to tell us a little bit about what you do at Centrica, what your role is, and also a bit about your involvement in the Dawn Committee.
Yeah, sure. So my role is a home services call center advisor. So I deal with customer breakdowns, with faults with boiler and other appliances in their house. I've had a number of different roles, especially with lockdown. So it has been, I think I've done about 4 different roles in the last 11 months, all telephony based. So it has been a bit challenging to chop and change, but I really like the home services role. I've been here for 6 years now, but I previously worked at British Gas for 9 years before as well. I left to try a few other things and
Mm.
came back again. And I mean, I'm also a trade union rep, which lets me help colleagues and things like that as well. And I think my involvement with Dawn really started from the point of being an ambassador for the difficulties I have with dyspraxia and dyslexia, and it just really went on from there. I enjoyed the ambassador role, but it didn't really take up a lot of time or anything like that. And I just figured, to look into contributing towards the committee as well. And I do enjoy the committee meetings as well. Yeah.
Good. That's always reassuring to hear, especially as I run them. So nice to hear you enjoy them. Okay, so today, yeah, you've agreed to come on and talk a bit about your experiences with dyspraxia and dyslexia. Why have you decided to come on and talk about it today?
Well, I do think they're misunderstood. And I think with dyslexia and dyspraxia, um, you see, there's a perception of, oh, I feel sorry for them. They've got dyslexia, dyspraxia, but there's actually a lot of positives as well, because it's really the way your brain operates is a bit different. And what I find is that uh, some of my friends that are also dyspraxic are good at drama or art and things like that, and it generally is a connection with some sort of artistic flair. And I guess for myself, I've wrote, and I maybe do other things like the election that I'm standing in next week, that other people probably wouldn't have that sense of outgoing. It's almost like a introvert extrovert thing
Mm.
with myself. But uh, the other thing that was really important with regard to wanting to talk more about dyspraxia rather than dyslexia. Dyslexia is very, most people have a grip of what that is, but dyspraxia, when I found out I was dyspraxic, I'd never heard of it before. And I think the awareness side of thing is important. But like I say, it's just the brain tends to work in a different way. And there can be coordination issues and clumsiness and sometimes social awkwardness and other things like that. But there's a good list of positives and fairly similar list of negatives with having these things.
Sure, sure. Yeah, we'll talk a little bit about those as well. When was it was first realised that you might be affected by the conditions? What were sort of the initial indicators? I know you've touched on a little bit about the sort of symptoms you have, but what were the initial things that came about that
Yeah. So I have long suspected I've been dyslexic. In fact, a English teacher in about fourth year at high school had, um, I think, I think he told me and not necessarily my parents, and I don't know what I did with that. But I've always known something wasn't quite right, but I think I was probably angry with him, but he was trying to help. But I think back then that would have been about 1989 or something like that. So it probably shows my age if that was halfway through high school. But I think he was being kind. But I think he probably should have brought it up at parents' night as well. But back then, even dyslexia back then wasn't all that well known. It's very well known now, and they actually do say that about um, 10 to 15% of the population will have some sort of neurodiversity challenges. And I think it was my writing, because back then it wasn't really computers. So I think that was the trigger point. And the trigger point for dyspraxia was me thinking I was dyslexic, and I'd parked it since about 1989 until about 2013, and I was working for a bank, and that this bank had done a lot of things for neurodiversity, but a lot of it was more their training department. And I think so the training department had almost forced my hand with this, well, with getting formally tested. They pretty much said if you don't get formally tested, you may end up losing your job and things like that. So it was quite a hard hitting conversation, and a day or two later I agreed to it. But I think I felt a bit annoyed. But I think overall, on reflection, it's probably been useful to understand that I've got these issues.
Yeah, well, I suppose it makes it easier if you understand, why your brain works like it does, how to manage it.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of my working life, I'm definitely a bit slower than my colleagues, and especially in reacting to what a customer says, or um, typing up notes at the end of the call, because it takes my brain a bit longer to process what's been said, and things like that. So these are the main issues. But in the office, when there's lots of chatting going around me, the noise can be very distracting. I'm quite easily distracted with it as well. So to an extent, home working has worked quite well for me, and it's quite good that for call center staff like myself, there is a commitment to look at new ways of working based on the fact that home working has generally gone quite well within British Gas.
Mm.
Um, at home, at home again, it's really noise related. I do have lodgers. If they're up and 3 in the morning, which they usually are, I'm woken every night. So again, it is related to noise predominantly. I'm maybe not as organised as some of my friends are as well, but um, I can drive and things like that, and that is quite unusual for someone with dyspraxia. I'm in a few support groups, and friends in these groups are all saying that they wouldn't even look to try, or those that have tried can't. But again, it's like anything to an extent. If people have a knowledge of these things, they might label people, but
Yeah.
everyone's dyslexia and dyspraxia can have a different level of severity, and it can be different challenges for different people.
Yeah, of course. I understand with dyspraxia there can be sort of some symptoms around clumsiness.
I'm quite clumsy, and I walk a bit different to other people and things like that. I suppose the thing that nearly killed me actually was falling down a 10-foot hole. It wasn't entirely my fault, but um there was pavement works taking place. There wasn't a warning sign,
Mm.
and it was quite a windy night. And I went round practically a 90-degree corner and didn't notice the barriers that were really flimsy, that were meant to be protecting the hole, must have blown down. That's how flimsy they were. And I tripped on the barrier and fell headfirst down about 10 foot. And I was lucky to only have a few nights in hospital, but it really could have killed me.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, no, that's quite a fall. And yeah, glad you're okay and not too badly harmed by it. So I know you mentioned about the quiet when you're at home, or not being in the office environment really helps you. Is there anything else that sort of anything you've implemented or any particular tools that help you on a day-to-day basis?
I think I think I mean, I know you. I think my writing project helped me put some closure to it, and I think taking part in some support groups through different communities on Facebook, and these are all dyspraxic ones rather than dyslexic, because I think my dyslexia is fairly minor, but my dyspraxia is down has been fairly severe. But I tend to help people more than seeking help,
Yeah,
because I think through the 6 year sort of journey that I've been on, and possibly my assertiveness in terms of what what positives I can take from it. I've sort of made myself a bit of a champion, both within the workplace and helping other people. I mean, what's interesting is I would say probably more than half the people in these support groups I go to have not managed to get employment, and that really saddens me. And I'm hoping that some schemes that are in place will start to become fairer to prospective employees. But you know what? I think the pandemic has really meant it's a grim time for some of these friends that I've got as well.
yeah. It must be very hard to deal with. What are so you just mentioned schemes that you've heard about that you hope will help. What sort of schemes have you heard about?
Well, the main one for people seeking employment is the Disabled Confidence Scheme,
Hmm.
but there's three levels to that, and really guaranteed interviews really only comes in at the top two levels.
Yeah.
But that's the biggest thing, because I think I think often the challenge is knowing what employers look for and getting the help with things like CVs, covering letters, things like that. So if that step's taken away from people, because people with that are dyslexic, dyspraxic tend to find making these documents really well presented more of a challenge. So if these steps are taken away, um, that they're quite a bit down the process. But what's important with employers is that they're not just ticking boxes and giving these folk an interview that they then have no intention to take it further. It needs to be that they're genuine candidates. That's really
Yeah.
important. And other schemes are access to work, which I think is underused. But that would really come in where an employee is looking for reasonable adjustments, and they've not necessarily been able to get the right adjustments through the company. and that can be almost like it's either used to help the company where they're not sure themselves of the best adjustments, or where the employee hasn't really reached agreement with management.
Yeah, and sometimes just having those little adjustments can make such a difference, can't they? Just removing a block, can definitely empathise with that. So you mentioned a little bit about perceptions of the two conditions, and sort of what advantages there might be. What obviously there being positives and negatives. So what has having both of them taught you? It sounds like there's a bit about confidence where you've been dealing with the challenges. And are there any particular myths that you'd like to bust? Any sort of stereotypical perceptions you've heard that you want to challenge?
Yeah, I mean, I think the advantages are that, and I don't want to play it down or to come across patronising, but I do think that the successes are more of an achievement if you do have challenges and you do really well. And I think it's important to celebrate successes. I mean, a lot of my successes came before I found to be dyslexic and dyspraxic. The last time I worked at British Gas, managed to get, I would describe it as middle management. So I had a responsibility for the predictive dialer department in Leeds. So career-wise, British Gas round about 2003 was the height of my career success. And there was a lot of determination there. Again, it was before I knew about some of these issues, but out with, um, I do have a sort of drive that I don't want to say, oh, this is my ambition, and just park it and never come back to it. So a good example there is probably the London Marathon, which did in 1998 and 1999, and that was hard work to get to the point of being able to run 26.2 miles in a reasonably decent time, pretty much non-stop. Myths to bust, I would say the sympathy one, because like I said earlier, it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just there's different positives and different negatives. So that would be the main one.
Great, thank you. No, that's really interesting to hear. And speaking of achievements, I also know that you've published a book. How did that come about? What triggered the thought process, and did you want to tell us a bit about the book?
Yeah, so the book came from the back of my experience at the bank, of pretty much been chucked into a corner and been forced to either address the fact that I might have some challenges or not. And then when I got the assessment, which took about 4 hours, and was a whole load of sort of motor tests and spoken tests and puzzles and stuff. On the back of the report that then came out, I started to think back to when I was a toddler, when I was a child, how school went, um, how early employment went, some of the sort of funny stories in my life, and I started to think, well, I've got some stories to tell loosely in the theme of overcoming disability. And disability is an interesting one because not all people that have dyslexia and dyspraxic would describe themselves as disabled. I do, and I don't have an issue with that, but I completely respect other people for saying that they don't want to call themselves that. And I think it goes back to labeling earlier, but the challenge there was to just share my story, and certainly in the early days of it, it did relatively well. I think the most flattering bit of feedback I got was from a lady in Wales that had come across the book and had decided to do some sort of postgrad or doctorate or something on my book. And she passed with flying colours, and she was just in awe of how helpful that was. And her main motivation for her studies, specifically in neurodiversity, were to do with her brother having similar challenges than I do. But in terms of where the book goes now, through some of these communities I'm involved in, um, I would call it facilitating a book of compiling stories of success and challenges for other people that have dyslexia, dyspraxia. So that will probably be out in about a year. I'm not really putting a huge time frame on it. I'm hoping to get some celebrity involvement in that as well, but that's never so straightforward. I do have some celebrity readers though. So Sir Jackie Stewart, 4 times Formula One champion, he's
Wow.
had a fair bit of engagement with me on my book, and he was really pleased to read it, which is good. He's actually ambassador for Dyslexia Scotland, and that was sort of the link. And I know that Holly Willoughby has read it as well, so I do have a few celebrities that have read it.
Gotta say, I'm very impressed, Michael. And your book is called Yellow Spaghetti, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yes. Okay, just a last question before we go. Where would you recommend people go? Are there any particular resources, websites, etc., that have, good information on dyspraxia and dyslexia?
I would say the Dyspraxic Foundation, and again, I've probably focused more today on dyspraxia, probably because it's maybe not quite as straightforward as dyslexia. And that's the main reason. Dyslexia does tend to be the difficulties with letters in the wrong places and sort of structuring wording and things like that, whereas dyspraxia is more about the coordination in general. But Dyspraxic Foundation is really good for resources. Also the likes of Amazon for other books, and probably more theoretical books than my one's more about stories and things like that. But I think that the primary source for myself has been community groups on Facebook, and a lot of these groups have met up on Zoom and things like that. And it's not just talking about the issues we've got, it's sometimes been just a chance to meet other people and have something in common with them, and maybe do quizzes, talent nights, things like that. So I've been known to sing a few songs and other things, and probably murder a few songs rather than sing them, but there you go.
I have to say I like singing too. Maybe we'll have to join. Big thank you, Michael. It's been really informative, really interesting, and really enlightening for me. I knew a little bit about the conditions, but it's always helpful to hear a personal perspective. So really appreciate you coming on today. So yes, a big thank you to Michael. We will be back for our next episode where we'll be talking to Rebecca Fernandez and Dino Di Renzo about parenting neurodiverse children. So until next time.